Welcome to the Garment channel. In this series, we'll be recreating the most requested item we've ever done, the €240 Yeezy Dove Hoodie. If you have no idea how fashion design works, don't worry, this video is literally made for you, as I'll explain the logic behind every single decision. We'll use CLO3D, the industry-leading fashion design software, to develop this basic t-shirt into the iconic oversized hoodie. We'll learn how to prepare the patterns for printing, and then we're off to the atelier to actually make the garment. But it doesn't end there, because nowadays, the presentation of your work is arguably just as important as the work itself. We'll learn how to create a custom avatar, dress it using the same CLO3D files, and we'll place it in the world with the full facial animation. So in other words, we'll be breaking down every single technique that we are using to build our own brand. And with that out of the way, let's get started with the design stage. And welcome to CLO3D. If you just installed the software and you're opening it for the first time, chances are you're gonna have a slightly different looking version than mine. And that's because I stick to version 7.0. And unfortunately, most of the newer versions have a lot of bugs. And just in case you're encountering any issues that you don't see me going through, you wanna go on the official website, scroll all the way down here to the footer, click on download, CLO installer, and you should choose the version that I'm using. Those are very stable, they're very functional, they pretty much sorted all the bugs, and afterwards they started introducing a lot of bloat. And now I'm back in CLO3D, and I just want to mention that this tutorial is specifically made for people who have no idea about 3D or fashion at all. If you don't know anything about this digital world and you just saw stuff online and you want to give it a shot, this tutorial is literally for you, which at the same time means that if you do have a bit of experience, you might want to skip ahead. Cool, so now let's run through the basics. On the left side, you're gonna notice this window here, which is the 3D window. CLO3D at its core is a 3D software, which also has a 2D component. The 2D component being on the right side. The way it works is I can just create components here in the 2D window, and those components are gonna show up in the 3D window. But in reality, if I were to let gravity do its thing, chances are the cloth is not gonna levitate in space, right? So why don't we try that? If I press space on my keyboard now, you're gonna notice that the cloth actually falls onto the ground. This is called a cloth simulation. And it's incredibly important because without it, we wouldn't be able to design digitally. If I want to go back, I'm gonna press Ctrl-Z. You actually don't have to do any of this. I just want to show you some principles before we actually start to design. But what if instead of the ground, we brought a person? I'm gonna go here in the library tab. I'm gonna double click on the avatar tab, and that's gonna open up here some more options. I'm gonna go for male v2, double click on it, and I'm just gonna open up Henry. I'm gonna go with the default settings, press OK. Now we have a person in our 3D window. So if I were to take the cloth, the same one that when we simulated just fell onto the ground, what if instead I move it up? All right, I'm gonna go through the basics, don't worry about it. You're gonna learn how to do all of this. But now I'm just moving it on top of my avatar. And what do you think happens if I press space now and start the simulation? Intuitively, you might think that, oh, maybe it's gonna wrap around the head of the avatar, right? Instead of falling onto the ground, it should probably stay on his head. Let's see if that happens. I'm gonna press space now. There you have it. So pretty much using this very principle of creating pattern pieces in the 2D window and then placing them and adjusting them in the 3D window, we're gonna be able to design some clothing. And I honestly think that this notion in and of itself is kind of revolutionary. So now I'm just gonna select the piece that we've already designed here. I'm gonna press backspace, and now let's run through some basics before we actually start designing. For instance, how do we navigate? How was I spinning around the avatar? How was I panning? How am I zooming in? Well, with the right click on my mouse, and I highly recommend that you use a mouse. In case you don't, I'm gonna run you through those options as well. But by default, if I press the right click, I'm gonna be able to rotate. If I press the right click in the 2D window, since there is no third dimension, I'm just not gonna be able to rotate. It makes perfect sense. If I press the middle click this time, so not the right click, I'm pushing down the middle mouse button, which is why a mouse is kind of required to operate this software. Check what happens. I'm pushing it now, and I'm moving up, down, left, right. So now I'm able to pan. And in combination with the rotation, so now I'm pressing the right click, now the middle click. Amazing. Can I do that in the 2D window? What do you think? Of course I can. I'm pressing it down, and exactly the same thing I'm able to do here. What about zooming in and out? I think this one is the most intuitive, and all that you have to do is to just rotate the scroll wheel. Or if you have a laptop, you can just pinch to zoom. So pretty much as you would on an iPhone or a tablet. But what if you don't have a mouse and you just want to get started right away? You're not going to wait for Amazon to deliver it tomorrow. Don't worry about it. Of course, there is a solution. So you want to go into settings, user settings, and then you want to go for view controls. And you're going to notice that the pan option, so the one that allowed us to move up, down, left, right, is on none, and then it has the middle mouse button. But we want to assign it differently. So why don't we try a combination of buttons in order to do that single function? I'm going to select, instead of none, I'm going to put Alt, and I'm going to use the right click, let's say. Now I'm going to close it. And this time, when I go on my laptop, I can just press Option or Alt, depending on if you're using a Mac or a Windows. And then once I press it down, I can now use the right click in order to navigate. The zoom is still the same. Pretty much everything is the same. You can right click to rotate, but then if you use it in combination with Alt, you're able to pan. This is why I highly recommend the mouse, because trust me, this is a lot more efficient to just be able to push the middle click and pan. So therefore, I'm gonna go into my personal settings and I'm just gonna switch it back. And now it's time to actually start designing the hoodie. So here in the library tab, I'm gonna head over to garment. I'm gonna click twice, and I think it's probably gonna have this name. So male_T. I'm just gonna double click, and now it's gonna ask me this: file not saved. Do you want to save? No, I do not want to save. I just want to open it. And you're gonna notice that all of the pattern pieces, which are coinciding with the t-shirt, are now here in my 2D window. If I zoom in, you're probably gonna be able to figure out what is what, right? So for instance, the slim components, let me just select them here. I'm gonna do a selection box. You can see them becoming highlighted in yellow. This is clearly the color. It also has a component here at the back. Okay, what about the others? How can I figure out which is which? Well, check this out. If inside of the 3D window, I click anywhere on a pattern piece, we're gonna notice this blue dot appearing, and it's gonna be positioned exactly where I've put the cursor and clicked. If I do it the opposite way around, it's not gonna be the same. So we can safely assume that this component, looking at the blue dot, this is our front panel. This one is our back panel. And if you are confused, you can just do this technique in order to figure out exactly what is happening. Cool, so the problem with this t-shirt is that it's a V-neck. And yeah, do I need to say more? Come on. I'm just gonna press A in order to open up the most useful tool inside of the software. It's called the Transform Pattern tool, or you can just use the shortcuts, which I'm gonna project here on screen as well, because I highly recommend that you never go into this menu and just learn the most useful shortcuts. I'm gonna make a selection box, and I simply wanna grab everything, delete it by pressing backspace or delete on my keyboard. Awesome. What about maybe the sleeves? Do we want to keep them? I feel like it's actually better to, at some point, learn how to draft them ourselves. So with A selected, again, I'm going to click on one of the sleeves, and then I want to hold down Shift in order to make another selection. Okay, and you're going to see both those highlighted in yellow, and I'm going to press backspace to get rid of them. What about those lines here that are showing up? Well, those dotted lines, that are running across are something called baselines. And I honestly don't know why they are inside of CLO3D. I never use them. In order to get rid of them, you need to select this tool, or you can press I on your keyboard. I'm gonna select it, delete it, select it, delete it, and let's just do the same for the back. And you might be wondering, why are you getting rid of all of those details? Can't we just design while keeping them? Well, actually, no. It's way too confusing. You should be looking at the cleanest possible setup, the most minimalist one, because that's the best way to learn. And for instance, I can just give you an example here. Say that I want to just curve this area. I'd have to select this point here and then select it and then deal with this Bezier, and then, oh my god, this is like a nightmare to operate. And the reason why that is because of those dots here, which I'm gonna delete them, and as you can see, it pretty much straightened our side panels here. So from here to here, now it's straight. I'm gonna press A, I wanna move this one just a tiny bit closer. Okay, and then I'm gonna press Z, and I'm also gonna select those points here. Let's get rid of them. Oh. I'm gonna press space in order to simulate and see exactly what I've done. But yeah, this is not ideal, okay? This actually looks incredibly bad, and it would be kind of unwearable depending on the type of fabric. Maybe if it's super elastic, it could work, but you don't want to wear this. So I'm gonna press Ctrl Z, and we need to make a distinction. This here, the black dots, are something called segment points. But those segment points, unfortunately, they work in conjunction with something called Bezier handles. If you've used any other software like video editing or even Photoshop, and you played with the pen tool, you're gonna know how those work. They have handles, and you can pretty much use the handles in order to adjust your curve. But I find this to be the absolute worst way of creating any sort of detail. So I'm gonna just press Ctrl Z, but instead, check this out, I'm gonna select the segment point after pressing Z, right click, and I'm gonna do convert to a curve point, and you're gonna notice that it actually completely disappeared. I'm gonna do the same on the opposite side. Let me convert it first, and then we're gonna figure out what happened. This time, when I press V on my keyboard, you're gonna notice those red points are now showing up. So when I press Z, they disappear. When I press V, they reappear. Well, the reason is because you don't want to be altering curves all the time. You only want to do it as more of a detailed approach. And the best way to do it is using those points. So for instance, I'm just going to select those here. I'm going to delete them. And if, for instance, I wanted to just curve this segment, I can use curve points. And this is much better than having segment points and Bezier curves. Trust me on this one. I'm gonna select those front panel ones as well. I'm gonna get rid of them. And my main approach, my main mentality behind this is, let's try and define the same curve with as few points as humanly possible. Because I could go in and just keep adding more and more and more and more, right? I could do this, but then if I wanna alter the curve and make it just maybe something like this, then I have to go like this. I have to select each and every single one of them. Maybe select those two, right? Go down. What is this jagged edge? It doesn't make any sense, right? Let's compare it now with the back panel. Say I just want to curve it like this. I would go in, grab it, boom, done. Right, so I'm just gonna Ctrl Z. Let's make sure that we go back. You can just press Ctrl Z like 100 times plus inside of CLO3D. This is like genius when it comes to the software. In Blender, you can't really do so many steps, but here you can just keep going and going all the way. So if you do find yourself making mistakes and not knowing where exactly you screwed up, Ctrl Z and Ctrl Y if you want to go forward. Awesome. And now I actually cleaned up those lines, and I think this is something that we can work with. And why the heck are we seeing the guy's nipples? When exactly did this happen? Because I don't remember adding any sort of tears here. This is like some Mean Girls type shit. Why is this happening? Well, when you're altering your pattern pieces, they might reset slightly. And in order to get them back into position, you can just select here. By default, you're gonna have this kind of simulation, the normal default. By holding down the left click, you're gonna find different options. You wanna avoid the first one, only use this one for most of the design work, and we're gonna use this one later when we get into rendering and more quality kind of simulations. So now, it still hasn't changed, has it? Well, let's this time just press it. Or we can use space, which is the most useful shortcut alongside A, Z, space. This is pretty much all that we'll be using. And you're gonna notice that as I have the simulation running, right? So as this arrow is blue, I'm now actually able to pretty much pinch wherever I want inside of the 3D window and help the simulation out. So if you have a situation kind of like, say, let me try and mess it up. I'm gonna stop the simulation, select the components, shift them down. I'm gonna simulate again, right? So say that you have a situation like this, you can start the simulation again, and then you can try and redress your avatar. And this is of course not the best way to do it. I just want to show you that it can be done. It's a useful tool, right? It kind of worked. But if you just want to do it a bit more efficiently, maybe in this situation here where the pattern pieces are super clear, you can alternatively go through this menu here and select those arrangement points. And the way it works, I select the front panel and I tell it that I want it here onto the front. I can also select the back panel. I want it on the back. Now when I press space in order to simulate, boom, there you go. That would have been a lot easier to actually rearrange in case you mess stuff up. Because trust me, this happens to the best of us. We're gonna mess up over and over again, but this is the design process. You have to mess up. We kind of have a V-neck vest. I guess it's a bit more Tyler, the creator. It's a bit more acceptable to have it this way. But say that, I kind of want it rounded out and I want to close up the neckline because this is bothering me too much and it's giving 2004. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to press Z. This is going to be the very first segment type operation. I'm going to select the dot here and say that I want to start shifting it up. And I'm not sure by how much, but maybe I have a slight idea. Maybe you're good with numbers. You can estimate that this is like 6, maybe 5 centimeters, right? So maybe I want to just move it up by 5 centimeters. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to start lifting it up. So raising it. I'm holding down the click as I'm doing this. Do not release it. And if you have released it, just do Control Z so we get on the same page. So I'm moving it up and then I can right click as I'm moving it, right click, and then I can input a custom value. Distance moved, and I can type in maybe 5 centimeters. There you go. Now I actually moved it up exactly to the point where I wanted it. And you're gonna notice that this is one of the most useful combinations. So whenever you have a value that either you calculate mathematically or you have a rough idea, you can always, as you're doing an operation, right click and input my distance. But you probably noticed that when I clicked on the segment point, it also showed up with those Bezier curves. In order to get rid of the Beziers that we have on this segment, so we have a set here and we also have a set here. I'm gonna press V, and this time I'm simply gonna add a curve point by clicking onto the segment. And now when I press Z and I select this segment and this segment point, you're gonna notice that the Bezier handle, which was heading this way, is now gone. So we can completely reshape the opening of the neck using this. There we go. Now it's rounded out, it looks a whole lot better. What about the shoulder? You probably noticed that this one has the handles, this one has the handles. I'm just gonna press V and I'm gonna add a point somewhere roughly down the middle. I'm gonna do the same for the back. I'm gonna also add one here. And I think that's about it in terms of customizing the base t-shirt. Now we actually have something that is editable and that we can truly work with. And now I opened up Pure Ref, which you can get for free potentially. You can also donate, but it's an incredibly useful tool because now it allows me to open up a reference and have it floating here. So even when I select the app, right, it's not gonna disappear. And now it's finally time to get cooking. And the best way to design a top is to start at the shoulders. And the main factor behind it is gravity, because the design is actually anchored on our shoulders and then it drapes down. So gravity is pretty much pulling our garment down. So any alteration that we do at the top is gonna domino down towards the core. But if we alter the base, it's not gonna affect the shoulders pretty much at all. And this approach also works for trousers. So if you want to design a pair of trousers, you want to start at the waistline and then work your way down. So with that in mind, let's try and break down the design. So what exactly are we trying to achieve when we're looking at the Balenciaga hoodie? Let's just have a look at the shoulders, since this is the best point to start. You can probably tell that those shoulders are absolutely massive compared to what we have here. The shoulder of the human, of the model wearing it, would probably go to around this point. And then they extend out pretty much double the length. So I'm locating this point by clicking on the shoulder, then clicking on the back. So those components are pretty much coinciding. Where do we want to take it? Well, we want to actually extend it out. Let's try and figure out by how much we actually want to do it. Say that we do want to go for that double length. We already have 163 mil. Let's maybe add an extra, I don't know, let's try 150 for this one and see what that looks like. So I'm grabbing the point, I'm still holding the left click pressed down, dragging it, and as I'm dragging it, when I see this purple line pop up, I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna type in 150. Which is a massive, massive, massive extension. Maybe I want to do the same for the back, right? Because if I were to simulate now, check what happens. It's still sewn as it was before. It's definitely changed the design. Something is happening here. Maybe you can't fully wrap your head around it, but what's happening is that this segment, the longer segment, is still getting fed and sewn onto the shorter segment. So in order to have this balanced look, we need to extend both of them out, so the front as well as the back. I'm gonna select the point, the segment point for the back panel, start dragging it, following exactly the same procedure, and then I'm gonna right click and type in 150. And let's try and simulate again and see what happens this time. Interesting, it's not good, but it's interesting enough. Okay, cool. So what do you think we should tackle next? You're probably looking at this and feeling like, oh my god, this opening doesn't make sense. The width of the hoodie should be much, much wider. This is like a tight fitting t-shirt and we're looking for one of the largest hoodies on the market. But let's take it step by step, right? We started at the shoulder, let's try and move down here, and we might return in order to reshape it, but we need to just be able to see the garment better. So looking in the 3D window, I'm gonna try and locate maybe the area. So I'm seeing that this segment here is representative of the side panel. So pretty much when those components get sewn together, they get sewn like this, right? The front and the back panel. And at the same time, at the shoulder, I'm just gonna do it quickly. Don't worry about what I'm doing here. They get sewn like this, right? It's starting to make a lot of sense. I'm just gonna move it out of the way, and this time I just want to grab this point here, both on the front and the back panel, and I want to bring it down. Let's see by how much. I'm just gonna click here and I'm just gonna eyeball it. Why not? I'm gonna press Z. I'm gonna make a selection box over both those points, or you can just click on one, hold down shift, click on the other, right? And this time I can actually edit both at the same time, since I'm just gonna move them vertically. I'm gonna click on it, start dragging both down. I can even hold down shift to make sure that I'm going vertically. Right click, and this time let's say that we want to move it down, I don't know, let's try 8 centimeters. I'm gonna type it in manually, which is 80 mil. I'm gonna press OK. Let's see what happened here. Okay, it doesn't quite look right, but what if I simulate it by pressing space? Yeah. Now it's actually starting to make a whole lot more sense, is it not? I think so. But again, it still looks kind of tight. It's just a t-shirt with some very weird flaps. And I feel like this design could actually fly to an extent. You still have to do some work, but it's reminiscent of Yeezy's latest work in a way. Cool. So how can we actually extend the point out is the question. Where can we add fabric to the t-shirt? At this stage, I am gonna call it a t-shirt, in order to make it much baggier. I can't click in air, right? I can't click here and try and figure that out. No, I'm gonna press Z. I'm gonna select this entire segment. So I wanna make sure that I'm extending the t-shirt out, both at the top and at the base. We're just making it wider. I'm gonna select the segment, hold down Shift, right click, and I'm gonna input my value. And we actually need to make it quite big. So I think I'm gonna do 100 mil. That's 10 centimeters. And then I'm gonna also select the back and I'm also gonna give it 100 mil. Okay, let's now simulate and check exactly what happened here. Okay, this is actually quite cool. It's very big and the opening doesn't seem to make too much sense, right? You don't see the line going in and then out. It's actually quite straight. So when we modified those segments, the shoulder one and the side one, we actually ended up extending the holes right here, the armholes, quite a lot, and we need to bring them back. And in order to get that done, I'm gonna press Z, I'm gonna select this segment, I'm gonna hold down Shift, and I'm gonna select this segment next to it. Right click, and I'm gonna match it up to start. So what that did is pretty much it perfectly snapped the components in place, so we can get a better understanding, since they are going to be sewn exactly like this in the real world, we can get a better understanding of the opening that we have here, which at the moment is completely massive. We just want to make it smaller. We kind of want our line to go from here and maybe go down to something like this, right? We have a massive hole that we need to fill. So I'm going to press V, I'm going to select the front, the two curve points, and I'm gonna bring them in, right? Maybe it's something like this. This one I feel like I could even select and get rid of, since it's only creating more trouble for me than it's worth. I'm gonna select the point again, start bringing it in, and just today I actually posted the reel on this topic, and it has to do with the 180 rule. So it's quite interesting. Whenever you have two components which get sewn together, you want to make sure that you have a smooth transition. So if I were to select this point and move it like this, check this out. This does not make any sense whatsoever. And if you were to take this at the atelier, you would actually end up smoothing it out with your sewing machine. But why not make the pattern piece perfect? You kind of have to as a designer. So I'm going to Control Z, and you just want to make sure that at least for a few millimeters you actually have a smooth transition. And that's also going to apply here at the shoulder, but we're going to get back to that later. I'm going to press V, I'm going to select this point. So pretty much following the same design language as we have for the front. Since it's so oversized, you're not going to be able to tell too much of a difference. I'm going to start dragging it in, and we want to make sure that we're accounting for that 180 rule. Now it's smoothly going from this shape to this shape. I'm gonna simulate, and I still feel like the opening maybe is a bit too small now. In order to adjust it, simply press Z. I'm gonna select both points at the same time, and I'm gonna drag them down. Let's bring it down by a lot more. Let's try 55 mil. And now we want to apply the same 180 rule here at the shoulder. And the problem is that I'm not actually seeing it being too much of an issue. So I'm going to press A, I'm going to press Control A or make a selection box on top of all of my components. And I'm going to press Control H on my keyboard, which is going to completely change the fabric. Or it appears as if it is, it's actually not. I'm gonna right click to show you exactly what I've done here, and it's called strengthen or unstrengthen. On Mac it's different, but you can just right click and look for this option here, strengthen. And what this does, irrespective of the fabric that you have applied, this here in the object browser on the top right is the fabric that we've been working with so far, and it's just called default for simulation. Right? But if I simulate this time by pressing space, you're gonna notice that now it's actually much harder. In reality, when you are creating garments, chances are you're using interfacing, you're using all sorts of extra fabrics, not just the one that you have for the shell. But when you are working in CLO3D, most of the time you just care for the exterior of the garment. Now I'm gonna zoom in, and you're gonna notice that we have a bit of a sharp edge here, which is not ideal. You could potentially include sharp edges in your design, but it makes it a lot more difficult to assemble and it creates a plethora of issues. This is why the 180 rule is so important. So in order to apply it, I want to just match up my front panel with my back panel. And to do it, I'm going to press Z. I'm going to select the shoulder line, hold down Shift, select the back shoulder line, right click after both of them are selected, match up, and we're going to do to start. All right, that took us to the neckline. It's fine, it's not good, it's not what we want. Let's do it again, and then I'm gonna match up and do it to end this time, because we want them aligned here. And now I'm gonna press V, and let's just correct our line so we have a smooth transition between them. I'm gonna do this, grab this point, bring it out, right? Boom, there we go. This is much better. Maybe we still have to modify something about it, because I feel like we could, from this point onwards, you can kind of see it here, from the shoulder, it's heading down. So in order to do that, I'm gonna select the components, I'm gonna right click and do rotate and reset along grain direction. And what that did is, based on the grain line, which you can see here, there's this arrow here, it actually resets it, it snaps it back in place. So as you are operating them and aligning them and doing all of that, you can always go back, rotate, reset along grain line. And you can also find the option here, I'm gonna move the reference out of the way, in the property editor. So with the component selected, scroll down, and there's this one here, grain direction. And just in case you did some mistakes, right, I can do something like this. So maybe do it at 25. You're gonna notice that the grain line is no longer straight. So if I were to press reset, this happens. Whenever I reset it, it's no longer gonna be vertical. And now if you wanna edit this, you don't know which way to drag it. Instead of going up, down, vertically, you're working at an angle, which is not ideal at all. To reset it, I would have to go back in, minus 25, type it in, press reset, there you go. And let's try to maybe, just maybe, bring our shoulders down. So I'm gonna select those points here, and I'm gonna hold down Shift and drag them down vertically. Let's try and do it by, not a huge amount, maybe move it to something like this. Let's try 50 mil, I think that's fair. Let's wait for it to do its thing. Sometimes this happens, it's just a bug inside of CLO3D. Don't worry about it too much. Simulate. Unless you're working with a massive project with multiple layers. In which case, you're kind of screwed. And you know what? This actually looks very good to me. I'm also gonna select all the components. Press Ctrl H in order to unstrengthen them. Simulate by pressing space. And this actually works quite well. But I feel like I could probably make this even better by simply adding a bit of a curve up. So imagine that we're adding some of that fabric back. So from the point of the shoulder is when it actually starts to drop. To do that, I'm gonna press V. I wanna move this point up, move this point up, select both. So relatively speaking, they kind of have the same distance from the neck opening. Select it, and let's try and shift both up at the same time. And I'm gonna do this one by maybe 20 mil, 2 centimeters. It actually has a bit more of a natural curve to it. It's following the shape of the body much better. And I think this actually works quite well. Let's try and figure out what happened here. So when we moved those points down, guess what happened with our opening? I'm gonna do it even further. The more that you actually do it, the more that at the same time you're closing the opening for the armhole. And this one, I feel like this could be a high fashion design right here. This actually looks kind of cool to me. Oh my god, dude, fashion is so much fun. I'm gonna Control Z. Remember by how much we drag those points down? By 5 centimeters. We definitely need to compensate for that drop here at the opening as well. So I'm gonna select them at the same time, drag them down, hold down Shift, right click as I'm dragging. And this time, I'm not gonna do it by 5, maybe do it by less. Let's try 35 mil. And I think that's fair. But guess what? When we did that procedure, we actually messed up everything. So we need to follow the 180 rule again. I'm gonna select the segments here, match them up to start. Yeah, you see? It's kind of sharp, not ideal. So bring down the curve point, Z, select them, right click, match up. I remember that it had to be the end and not the start, and you can definitely see a massive, massive difference here. Bring the point. Let's try and do it from both sides, so front and back at the same time. Okay. Then select them, go into grain direction, reset, and A to now move the pattern so we have a better idea of what we're working on. Okay, and when I simulated, you probably saw that. It's not the end of the world. I'm just gonna grab the front panel, move it towards the front when the simulation is stopped. And before we move any further, this is the perfect time to actually save the project, because CLO is kind of prone to crashing. If it happens, then chances are you're not gonna be able to recover all the work that you've done. So I'm gonna go into File and make sure that you make a habit out of this. And you can just select Save Project, or in my case, I'm gonna do Save As Project. And I'm gonna call it Part 2. And now I'm actually a bit bothered by those red lines. I knew that I wanted to get rid of them much earlier, but better late than never. I'm gonna select this tool here, which is meant for notches. Simply click, delete, and the reason why they exist is once you print out the pattern, it kind of helps you align stuff up. But when you are designing, it's just more information to take in and have to ignore. And just a quick tip, you probably saw me snapping into those default positions very, very quickly, and this is an incredibly helpful technique. On your keyboard, I want you to press the numbers, not on the numpad, but rather on the regular side of the keyboard. 1 is gonna take you from this angle, 2 is gonna take you from the front view, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 doesn't do anything, and 8 takes you from the back view. And the ones that I use the most is 2, just when I want to reset directly from the front. 5, I guess I use a lot since it goes from the top view and it helps me position the pieces. I can grab the back, shift it around, and 8 is quite helpful as well. It takes me from the back view, and it's just quicker and easier and a bit more precise than if you want to just rotate and try and figure out exactly how to position the camera. So just press 2, boom, there you go, space, perfect. And in case you're finding any weird rotation, right? So if I click here on the avatar, you're gonna notice that my rotation is around the point where I last clicked. This is very important, because say that you're trying to locate this area here, trying to diagnose it, and then you rotate. Oh, why is it not rotating around the area that I'm focusing on? Because you need to click on it first before you do the rotation. And even in this case, it's not perfect, but it's better. So you click, and now when I rotate, it rotates around it. These are some helpful tips that are actually going to improve your workflow. So now let's address the next elephant in the room. And in this case, I want to start drafting the sleeves. Okay, I feel like the body is actually large enough. The original is a bit larger, so we could potentially go even further. But the thing is, you're gonna make this in the real world, and I'm not sure that you want it to be as large as the original, because even the XS, it looks like a triple XL on a regular sized person. Go on YouTube, check it out, it's crazy. I feel like this is a appropriate oversizing option. How exactly are we gonna create the sleeve? Well, I'm simply gonna press S on my keyboard, which is gonna bring out this tool here, the rectangle tool, and I'm gonna click it here. Let's just do this very quickly. And I need to run you through the logic behind how a sleeve works. So as you can imagine, if I were to just grab this component and sew it this side to this side, it's simply gonna wrap around and become a cylinder. In order to open up the most basic sewing tool, you wanna press N, which is this one here. I'm holding down the left click, it's called a segment sewing. So I know that my segments on the right side and the left side are equal, therefore I can use this sewing tool. I'm gonna click once there, and the second time I'm gonna click it here on the opposite side. Maybe you're feeling like something is wrong because you can see those lines are going across, right? They're going diagonally. Maybe it shouldn't be like this, but whatever. Let's just try it out. I'm gonna simulate. Okay, it's a bit of a mess. Maybe I'm not happy with the fact that they're falling onto the ground. I wonder, is there a way to stop the gravity and just have pieces flowing in 3D space? Well, of course. This is a 3D software. It has many advantages to working in the real world. In order to get rid of gravity, you want to hold down the left click, you want to select the normal default simulation, and now in the property editor, you're gonna see different options show up. So you probably noticed when I select a component, it has its own properties. When I select another one, it has another set of properties. If I, for instance, select the avatar, another set of properties shows up here on the bottom right. And the same is with simulation. So whenever you're trying to figure stuff out specifically to the problem that you've encountered, it's usually a combination of selecting the correct thing first and then the properties are going to show up. So for gravity, right? Look for the options, scroll, you're going to find gravity. It's on -9,800, which is the G value. It's the small g value, -9.8 meters squared. This is how gravity is measured on Earth. But let's just try and put it on 0. So basically no gravity. Nothing is going to be pulling this piece towards the ground. It's just going to float. And when I simulate now, oh, you're going to see that something quite weird is happening. I wonder why that is. It should be just like a cylinder, right? This is what we're anticipating here, but it's not. So let me just Control Z. And this time, I'm gonna press B in order to select my sewing line. Click on it, right? You can select either the right side or the left side. And on my keyboard, I'm gonna press backspace in order to delete it. And let's do it again, but this time, I want you to pay attention at what I'm doing. I'm pressing N on my keyboard, and this time, I'm sewing from the top. This is how I did it last time. You can see how it's crossing over. And I'm sewing it on the top side as well on the opposite segment. And you can probably notice, let me try now to do the base with the top. Let's imagine that we're trying to do that. You can see that this small notch appears when you're hovering your mouse. And if you're hovering more towards the left side, it's going to be on the left side. If you're hovering more towards the right side, it's going to switch over. And this is telling you where you're starting your sewing line. This is incredibly important. You cannot ignore this because then you're just gonna create more issues than you're gonna solve. And just in case you've sewn it by mistake, starting from the top here with the base here, so opposite of what you want, you can press B, select your sewing line and press Control and B on your keyboard. And this is gonna simply flip them over. I'm doing it multiple times, and you can see when the lines are parallel to one another, this is when you've sewn it properly in this case here. So now when I simulate with the gravity on 0, boom. There we have it. I'm even gonna select it by pressing A, selecting it, and then I'm pressing Control H. There we have it. This is simply gonna strengthen it and make it a proper cylinder. Position it in space, simulate. Now you can see it floating midair. So what if we actually wanted to sew this component directly onto the body? Well, let's try it. This would actually work. It's not ideal, but let's try it. We first need to match it. So imagine that we're connecting this cylinder with this opening. You want to make sure that the opening is exactly the same size as the opening on the cylinder. Right? It's quite intuitive. If it's smaller, it's actually going to gather the fabric and you're going to have a very difficult time actually sewing this in the real world. So how exactly can we match those two components together? Well, I'm going to press Z. I'm going to select this segment, hold down Shift and select the back segment as well. And as you can see, apart from them being highlighted in yellow telling me that I've done the selection properly, I also have a number hovering below my cursor, 649.8. So this is the value of the opening that I actually want my sleeve to match. Let me do it again. 649.8, and I can take this value into my calculator. I'm gonna boot it up now. And I want to type this in, so 649.8, and divide it by the value that I currently have, 500, right? Equals, and then I want to multiply everything by 100 in order to transform what's called a ratio into a percentage that we can actually use. And now I'm going to press on equal, I'm going to select this value, I'm simply going to Control C it, and now we're going to use it in order to scale our sleeve and make it bigger. And you're gonna notice that it actually matches. In order to scale it, I'm gonna select A. I wanna click on the pattern piece, and now I wanna scale it, but it's important which handle I'm grabbing. Because if I were to just scale it like this vertically, guess what? The opening is exactly the same. It's still 500, right? If I scale it this way, then it's only gonna go sideways. But I wanna scale it proportionally. So the entire thing, which is gonna affect both the width as well as the height. In order to do that, you just wanna grab one of the corners, but we're not gonna eyeball it because it's impossible to tell when is this gonna match. I have no clue. And you don't wanna do it like 1,000 times over to make sure that it's matching. No, we're gonna use the trick that I taught you earlier. So as you are dragging one of the corners, I'm gonna press escape to cancel the operation. And you're gonna notice that I can do it from this corner, escape. I can do it from this corner or this corner. It's all the same, right? I'm just gonna choose this one, drag it out, and then I'm gonna right click. And now I'm gonna press Ctrl V in order to input the value that I grabbed from my calculator. And you're gonna see 129.96. Press OK. There we have it. And now, if I were to hold down Shift, select this value, check it out again, 649.8. Let's see what we have here. 649.8. So we know that if we sew the sleeve onto the body, it's actually gonna match the opening perfectly. But before I do that, I actually want to make sure that I'm positioning the sleeve in its relative position in 3D space. And that's going to tell me exactly where I want to start sewing it and where I need to end it, because otherwise you can just mess it up. And it can be incredibly confusing. So I'm simply going to click on it, rotate it. I want to make sure that I'm getting the seam line down at the armpit opening. So this seam line here at the base should coincide with this one here. I'm gonna rotate it and then I'm just gonna bring it back. I'm pressing 2 on the keyboard, rotating it, and there we have it. I'm gonna simulate, get it roughly into position, and you're probably gonna notice that there are some issues here when it comes to my design, because you can kind of see it maybe even from this angle without it being assembled and everything. Why is there a gap here at the top and there isn't one at the base? We're gonna worry about that later because there is an actual technique that you need to apply when drafting sleeves and they should never look like this. But for now, I just want to teach you how you can sew it onto the body so we see exactly what it looks like. And in order to connect 2 segments onto a single one, we could potentially use the end tool, but the end tool I exclusively use when I know that my 2 segments are equal in length, like it was the case here, or maybe at the shoulder, you definitely want to use it. But in case you're connecting multiple segments onto a single one, we need to learn a new tool, and it's called the free sewing, or you can just press M on your keyboard. Okay? And the way that it works is you click once in order to tell it where you want your sewing line to start, and you click a second time to tell it where you want it to end. And then you need to tell it where you want to connect the first sewing line to. So we'd be following exactly the same procedure. So maybe clicking here, going up, but as you can see, this is not gonna work because it's actually a huge difference between the first sewing line that I've drawn compared to the second one that I'm doing. And you can probably see this blue dot here, which is telling you exactly how far out you would need to take the sewing line just so they're matching. But that just doesn't make any sense. This is the opening on the body and this is the sleeve opening. Why would we ever go up the shoulder? I'm gonna cancel the operation by pressing escape. And this time I'm gonna do it slightly differently. Why don't we try this instead? I'm gonna click once here at the base and I wanna take it all the way to the shoulder, click for a second time. And this time I'm actually gonna connect it like this, right? So we're basically connecting the shorter segment onto the larger one. And as I'm dragging my cursor, you can see the same blue dot appear. But this time, it's actually gonna guide us perfectly, telling us where we should end our sewing line. So I'm gonna click there. Let's now do exactly the same thing for the back. So I'm rotating here. And in case you lost your bearings and you don't know exactly which part is which, you can hover your mouse over in the 3D window and it's gonna show you. So you can see the same dot appearing in the 2D window as I have it represented in the 3D window. This is incredibly useful. So this time, let's take it from the shoulder at the back. I'm gonna click it starting from the shoulder and taking it down. So this is where we left it, at the shoulder on the front, which coincides with the back. Those two segments get sewn together and then they connect onto the sleeve. And I'm gonna click from here, and as you can see, the blue dot appears here, right at the end, telling us that, hey, you've actually done a perfect job at matching the segments together. Because if that was not the case, it would have shown earlier or later. But it's perfect. It's right where we need it. So I'm gonna click there in order to finalize it. I'm gonna select the sleeve and I'm gonna press Ctrl H in order to unstrengthen it. And now I'm gonna hold down my left click here and reset the simulation type. So remember, we had it with no gravity. Stuff was pretty much floating in midair, but this time we want it falling towards the ground. So I'm just gonna reset it to normal. And as you can see, the gravity is back at minus 9800. So you don't have to remember those values. You just go here, click again, reset. And now when I press space, it's simply gonna fall towards the ground. And as you can see, this kind of works, doesn't it? It's not ideal from a design perspective because this is a plain cylinder and sleeves are never just plain cylinders, unless you're doing the latest easy release, I guess. Those are the most primitive clothes ever designed. But yeah, you can kind of see that it works, and the fact that the hoodie is massively oversized actually helps a lot with hiding the imperfections that we have in our design. Let's shorten it, and in order to get a reference point, I'm simply gonna click in the 3D window and we can see it in the 2D window popping up. So I'm pressing Z, keeping the reference that I just saw in mind. You can hold down Shift in order to make sure that you're dragging it perfectly vertical, and I'm gonna just let go. Let's see what that leaves us with. And I think in terms of the length for the sleeve, we could potentially go a bit longer just because we're adding a cuff at the end. It's going to be elastic and you want to have it slightly baggier. Now I want to go back into my simulation. So I'm going to go back to that normal default simulation. The gravity, I'm going to take it back to 0 just because I want to reshape the sleeve to get it proper and not have any sort of weird design decisions around it. And now I'm gonna delete the sewing lines that we just did. Or we can just deactivate them. If I right click with both of them selected, I have this option, deactivate sewing. So I guess we don't have to do it again, even though we're definitely gonna have to readjust. Okay, so this is how you actually want your sleeve to be shaped. We know that humans, we don't walk around like starfishes. We don't have our hands walking out like this at 90 degrees, or not even like this. Our normal position is to have our hands right next to the body, and we could potentially design our sleeve like that, but it would become a more geometrically shaped product. So when you're thinking of a blazer, you actually want to design your sleeve with the arm next to the body, but in our case, we want it to be a bit of a dropped sleeve. And we already have contact here at the base, so in theory, all that we have to do is to just figure out a way to add the fabric in order to fill out the gap that is naturally formed here. And how exactly can we do that? Well, check this out. I'm gonna press V on my keyboard and I'm gonna create one point, a curve point right here at the top, and I just wanna drag it up. I'm gonna simulate again to see it in action. Move it up, and try to get it as close as possible to the opening, but you're still gonna notice, it's not linking at the back. Maybe we should add a tiny bit more. So V again, I'm just gonna raise it to something like this. I think this actually works quite well. You also have to think of it as a connecting point, right? So the back is gonna drag the sleeve towards it, while the sleeve is gonna drag the back panel towards it. So they're pretty much getting fused together. I need to rotate it. And now you can actually see a massive difference. The gap is nowhere near what we had in the beginning. But there are a few other issues that we have to address. First of all, the straight line that we started with is definitely, mathematically, a lot shorter than the arc that we've just created. So imagine this. If you were to compare, this one is definitely longer. It's walking a longer distance. I'm gonna delete it now. So we basically have to do the math again by measuring the opening and then scaling it down. But even before that, I'm gonna grab the sleeve and I'm gonna move it outside of the arm, okay? And you can probably notice here that we have an issue. We don't want to have those sharp edges. I'm revisiting the 180 rule. And the 180 rule is telling me that I need to have a very smooth transition between where those components are connecting. And it's kind of impossible to see at the moment since it's a single piece and it gets sewn here and we only get to see it flat. But why don't I try to do this? I'm gonna introduce a new tool this time and it's called the internal line. You can find it here or you can just press G on your keyboard. This is one of the most useful tools, so definitely learn it. I'm gonna now create an internal line roughly down the middle. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're gonna go back in this step. And then I'm gonna right click in order to cut and sew. And now I'm just gonna match it up. So remember the procedure that we did here for the shoulders or the procedure that we did here at the armpits. Guess what? We also have to do it for the sleeve. So I'm gonna select the sides, which I know are getting sewn together, and I'm gonna match them up at the start. And now the problem is actually super apparent. In order to fix it, I'm gonna press V and I just wanna smooth out my transition. And a great rule of thumb for this one, when you're looking at the back of the body, you actually need a bit more of the fabric. So if we had to decide between which side to curve more, it's usually the front that gets curved in more. And this is again more apparent when you're doing tailored work, just because of how the arm is usually moving towards the front more than you're flexing it towards the back. It's just the way that the body works, but you don't have to worry about it too much here since this is a completely oversized piece. And now that I'm quite happy with my feature here, I could potentially go back in and merge the components. So I can press Z, select both of them by holding down Shift and then merge them back. But I'm not gonna do that because we also wanna do a bit of a taper. So imagine when you are looking at a sleeve, it's buff at the shoulder and it becomes a tiny bit tighter towards your hand, which is perfectly natural. You're just larger here, smaller here at the wrist. And let's try and do that. Let's add a bit of a taper. I'm gonna press Z, I'm gonna grab this point and drag it in, and this one we can actually do quite a large amount. I'm gonna do 45 mil and 45 mil on the opposite end as well. And you're probably gonna anticipate that we again screwed up the 180 rule. So we need to match it up. To start, I need to bring this point up, bring this point up, bring this one up. There we have it. And now we also have an issue here at the base. So I'm gonna create a curve point, create another one here for later down the line. Do one here, do one here. And we're gonna use only the ones towards the interior in order to smooth out our feature. So doing the tiniest adjustment, but it makes a difference. Trust me on this one, it does make a difference. And now I'm gonna press Z. I'm gonna select the middle points, right click, match them up. To start. There we go. And we can now check the 180 rule and how it applies here, and you're gonna notice that it's actually quite good. So now that we're happy, guess what? I'm just gonna select them, but this time instead of doing match up, I'm gonna merge them. And then I'm bothered by those segment points that have been created. So I'm gonna select them and I wanna just convert them to curve points like we did in the past, right at the beginning of the project. I'm gonna select it, right click, rotate, reset. There we go. And now if I were to take the measurement for the armhole opening, you're gonna notice that it's 649.8. And our sleeve, what do you think? Is it larger or smaller? What do you reckon? Or identical? 649.8 and this one is 693.3. So quite a massive difference. We need to boot up the calculator one more time. 649.8 divided by 693.3 equals times 100 to transform it into a percentage, the ratio into a percentage, equals, and you only want to grab, when you have numbers like this one, you only need the first two decimal points, right? So those are kind of useless. Only if you see a 9 here, maybe you can make the 2 a 3, but it's not the case. It's a 5, so it's fine. I'm gonna copy the value, press A, select it, grab from one of the corners, drag it, right click, and then I want to just input the percentage from my calculator. Press OK. And now I want to make sure that my sewing lines are perfect, which they're not. It's to be expected. In order to fix them, I'm just going to press B. First of all, I want to activate them. A new one was created here, which is a bit inconvenient. I'm going to right click and I'm going to do activate sewing for the selected. Let's grab the sleeve, position it closer towards the body, even though this is going to be a complete mess, I reckon. Since we did so many modifications, Chloe is incredibly confused and I just simulated. This is not going to work. I'm going to press B and I want to just unsew it on this segment here. This is going to help the simulation and we're going to sew it back afterwards. So check this out. I can help it, raise it, let it fall towards the ground. There we go. And now I'm just going to sew it on the side. This is basically the hoodie. And if I go into my normal default simulation, once it falls due to gravity, you're gonna notice that this line is a lot cleaner than what we had in the past. And the reason why the after looks so much better and it's not caving in before it was doing this, right? So the sleeve was pretty much pulling onto the garment, not letting it sit in this relaxed state. Again, the reason was the lack of this slope. Awesome. Now, in order to do the sleeve for the opposite side, we have to go through exactly the same procedure one more time. So I'm gonna press S, I'm gonna create it, and come on. You didn't think that was the case. That would have been like the silliest thing ever. No, you don't wanna design things that are symmetrical more than once. I'm just gonna select the sleeve, and on my keyboard, I'm gonna press Control D in order to duplicate it symmetrically linked on the opposite side. Or I'm gonna press escape for now just to show you exactly which option this is. It's called clone pattern with linked editing, symmetric pattern with sewing, or just Control D. Let's do Control D. Please learn this one because it's one of the most useful tools, since most of the time we're only gonna be designing half of the body. Only if you're doing asymmetrical pieces, you need to design both separately. But this is a hoodie. We have two sleeves on our hoodie. There we go. And it's gonna magically pop up on the opposite side and it's gonna be perfectly sized and perfectly fitted. So now I just wanna select the trace tool. I wanna get rid of this baseline. Select it again, delete it. That's it. This is basically the silhouette of the hoodie. I know it doesn't quite yet look like the one that we're trying to create here, but trust me, it's 95% of the way there. There are just a few details that we need to address, but I guess the elephant in the room in our case here is gonna be the hoodie. Let's try and design the hoodie. Are you excited for this one? Because I know I am. But before we actually design the component, we need to open up our neckline just that tiny bit more. And we need to reshape it because you can see that in the original, it's actually going quite high up onto the neck. Maybe, I think it's good as we have it now, but we need to drop the shoulders. We want our line to flow something like this. So from here, boom, something like that. How exactly are we gonna do that? Well, I'm gonna press Z and I'm just gonna start dragging this point, the one that coincides with the opening on my neck, and I'm gonna drag it on the original line. So you can see the purple highlight, which is telling me you're doing the right thing, right? You're just modifying the feature based on the original design. I'm gonna right click and let's try and approximate. I think this one, we need to do it quite drastically. I'm gonna do 28 mil. This is perfect. But you can probably imagine that we screwed it up. And if we don't simulate, you're gonna notice the issue. At the back, we need to also compensate for this. I'm gonna press B. And if I click on my sewing line, it shows up with a number. Right underneath my cursor, you can see minus 26.8. So even though we only compensated here 28 mil, in the end, due to the curve structure or the differences that I might have not accounted for, we have a 26.8 mil difference. So we can use this as an opportunity to actually match the segments perfectly together. I'm gonna press Z, start dragging the point, and I'm gonna type it in manually, 26.8. There we go, on the original line. Now it's still 1 mil difference because it's not a straight line. When you drag a straight line, you know that moving it by 1 centimeter alters it by 1 centimeter, but not when you have a curved line, because you're changing the feature slightly and you still need to compensate for it. So this one is currently 1 mil. Let's try and do 1 mil. And now it's actually on 0. So we did a primo job. I'm gonna simulate this time and you're gonna notice that, yeah, we're actually headed in the right direction. I might not be happy with the fact that it's fallen, the opening at the back, it's fallen a bit too low. In order to change it, I'm just gonna press Z and I need to drag this point up. And then I'm gonna press V and drag the entire feature up. But again, we need to check with the 180 rule. So I'm gonna press Z, select the shoulder line, right click, match up to start. And you can notice that if I stuck with this shape here, it would have been a problem. It creates this super sharp angle here, and we definitely want to not have it here. It's not in the original, trust me on this one. So V, I need to actually help it quite a lot. And then I need to curve it back out, okay? But it's actually becoming impossible to manage. So we might have to go into the front panel this time and extend it out as well in order to help our line. It's now corrected. And you can see now it's a straight line. Here at the back, it still has this very sharp feature, which is not good at all. So I'm raising that one. And yeah, I think this actually works quite well. And if you're too worried about this, right? Why is this happening? If my curve is perfect, then why is the fabric, even if I zoom in here, why is it not curved like it should? Well, if you print it out and cut it in the real world, it is. Don't worry about it. But the reason why this is happening, so whenever you have a curve and it's not perfectly curved, is because of something called particle distance, which shows up here in the property editor. So for instance, if I were to take the value of 20 and I made the particles smaller by giving them a smaller value, something like a 5, when I press enter, you're going to notice a massive difference. But at the same time, if I simulate, you're going to notice that the simulation now is running a lot worse than it was before. So this is why you have to find a balance between the design stage, where you should be working with large particle distances, like 20 is by default. Maybe you want to take it down to 10 if you feel like you're not seeing your proper result, but it all depends on how good your computer is. By default, stick to 20. If it's crashing or it's colliding or you have some weird issues, maybe take it down by 5 and do it again if it keeps repeating. Awesome. I'm going to select the patterns, right click, rotate, and I'm going to reset along the grain direction. Grab the front panel, move it like this. And now it's time to actually start designing the hood. And we're going to get to this detail later. Don't worry about it. We're going to make it so it's a single piece, it's seamless, it's beautiful. But for now, I'm just worried about the principle behind it. Let's try and figure that stuff out. I'm going to press this in order to create a rectangle. I'm just going to do a regular sized one. Okay, I'm going to move it to the side, rotate it slightly, whatever. Get it roughly in my position. So let's try and think of how a hood is actually designed and how it connects onto the body. Well, it connects here at the front, a regular hood, not this one. This one is different, but we're gonna get there, and you're gonna see that the process is actually super interesting because you can weld stuff up, you can merge it here. In the real world, if you cut it, you're screwed, but not in CLO3D. So how exactly does it work? Well, a hood actually starts at the front and it connects all the way towards the back, and then you have another symmetrical piece on the opposite side, and they connect from here pretty much towards the front. I need to take a measurement. I'm gonna press Z, hold down Shift, and I need to measure the front and the back together. I'm gonna grab this measurement, 288, divided by the value that we currently have, which is 500, and multiply by 100 to transform it into a percentage, 57.6. I'm now gonna select the half of my hood and I'm gonna input the percentage. So now we basically just scaled it down. So it's gonna perfectly match. Okay, some weird shit happened. Don't worry about it too much. Let's just rotate. I kind of hate CLO when this stuff happens, but whatever. It is what it is. I'm gonna press M, and this time I'm gonna teach you a different way of sewing stuff. So multiple segments onto a single segment. This is the fastest way to do it, but it's just a bit more advanced. But I feel like you've already watched the 40 or 50-minute tutorial, so you may as well start giving yourself some credit. You've made it this far. Let's keep stacking on the knowledge. So this time I need to locate exactly what I'm sewing. You can see that it's not positioned correctly. I'm just gonna rotate it. Hold down shift to rotate 90 degrees. Okay, and now it's coinciding. So the way that I'm looking at it, this is the front, this is the back. I'm gonna start at the front. I'm gonna click on it, take it all the way towards the back. And now we actually wanna sew it by holding down shift after making the first selection. We're gonna start at the front, keep holding down shift. So I clicked where I wanted to start, where I wanted to end. And now we need to continue onto the shoulder. And looking at the colors here, you can see that the brown color coincides with this side of the hoodie. So it might be a bit confusing to wrap your head around, but trust me on this one. I'm just gonna continue then onto the shoulder, click once, take it all the way towards the back, click for a second time, and I'm gonna release it. Okay, and now you can see that through a single operation I actually managed to connect the hood directly onto the body. And before I simulate, I actually want to duplicate it symmetrically on the opposite side. Please tell me that you remember the shortcut for this. Say it with me. Control D. So after selecting it with A, Control D, and now it's gonna get duplicated on the opposite side. So this is the most primitive shape that you could ever give a hoodie. And now we actually also want to sew it at the top and at the back. And the fastest way by far to do this is by using the segment sewing tool. If you want to do it in the 2D window, it might feel a bit confusing because you don't know which side is which, but this time it's one of those rare occasions when it's actually easier to just sew it in the 3D window. So check this out. I'm looking for the notch, starting at the top, right? Click once, look for the segment that I want to connect it to, find the top, click, boom, done. Let's also connect the top, boom, done. Now I'm gonna press Q on my keyboard in the 3D window or A in my 2D window to change from the default tool and go into the move tool, and space in order to simulate. Boom. It looks like trash, does it not? I guess you could potentially transform this into a brand, but it's not gonna be comfortable at all. And also the hair is, think of it like a hair of a statue inside of CLO3D. It's not as it would be in the real world. So we may as well remove it and leave the avatar with a bald head. Select the hair, right click, and we're gonna delete the hair and shoes. Simulate again, and now we get a better idea of how it's wrapping around the head. And it definitely has way too much tension. It's lifting the hoodie up. You can see it here by just how much it's lifting it. It's super uncomfortable. Let's now address the overall curve at the back, because I feel like this is the most off-putting part of the shape. I click in the 3D window, figure out which corner is the one that's actually pointed out, and I'm gonna select the point, right click, and transform it into a curve point. Simulate. Now it's actually starting to look more like a hoodie. It's still nowhere near perfect. So I'm gonna grab my point and move it down a bit, but then I maybe feel like the hood is actually raising the hoodie too much. And in order to compensate for that, what we can do is to add a bit more fabric. So imagine that I'm moving the hoodie up. So I'm just gonna grab this point and lift it up. There we go. Simulate. It's still not perfect, but at the back it kind of is perfect. You can actually see it slacking. So why is there a difference? Well, check this out. What if instead of lifting only the tip here, I go towards the base, leave the back as it is, and I start dragging the front down. So where I'm adding fabric, but this time at the base. I'm gonna simulate it, and you're gonna notice that there is a differential even if I take the hoodie, right? I can select it, deactivate it, simulate, and you're gonna notice that by default, the hoodie is actually taller at the back compared to the front. That's where the difference comes from. Our spine, our entire spine is made to bend forward. This is why everything about us is more towards the front than towards the back. And the hoodie should also represent the physiognomy that we have. So I'm gonna select it now, move it back, right click, and I'm gonna activate it back. I'm gonna simulate, and let's try and figure out if we gave it enough, because we do want it to be a bit relaxed. Maybe I should go a bit further. I'm gonna grab the point, let's drag it down by an extra 12 mil, something like this. And now we can actually see it being a lot more relaxed. Maybe it has a bit too much fabric on this side, which I'm not happy with. What can I do about it? Well, we're still gonna have to rematch the hood since we already extended this line out. You can imagine the original. It was like this, now it's much longer, but we're gonna add even a bit more length. So let's just do it now. I'm gonna press V in order to bring out the curve points. And I wanna add a bit of a curve towards the front and a bit of a curve towards the back. Why is that? Well, we're still following the 180 rule. So if I press Z, select those two segments. I'm afraid I can't match them up since they are symmetrical, but I can just rotate them manually. Okay, let's have a look. There we go. We need to lift this one even a bit further. Okay, and at the front where we are actually going to be sewing them, we need to do exactly the same thing. So let's follow the 180 rule. Align them properly. Boom, there we go. And now, check it out. It's actually quite perfect. Yeah. Maybe I can place it up. Yeah, something like this. So now the base of our hood is actually perfect. Let's now rematch it. So I'm going to press Z. I'm going to select the front. Hold down Shift. Select the back. 288. Divided by the value that we currently have. 296.3. 296.3 equals 97.19, or we can call this one 97.2. Okay, I'm gonna select it, start dragging it out. 97.2, and let's just double check. 288. There we go. So now I'm just gonna simulate again, and at the base at least it's perfect. We just have a bit of a excess fabric here, which I'm not too fond of. And in order to get rid of it, we can just curve this puppy in. There we go. Maybe I've done it too much. And this is the part where your artistry and your design is actually gonna get tested, because you can do a lot with this. I personally don't wear hoods too much, but I think something like this is very reminiscent of the original. You can see the shape. So let's go from the front profile. The bulk here is perfectly matching. And now, in order to do the merging here at the front, this is gonna blow your mind, but it's my favorite part by far. I'm gonna press X on my keyboard, which is a new tool, and it's called Add Point / Split Line. And then I'm just gonna create a point, I reckon. Let's try around here. I'm just clicking, and I've done it at 9 centimeters. And now I'm gonna add a bit of a curve here. I'm gonna grab the top and tilt it back, just so I'm able to merge those components together. Right click, merge. There we go. Because if they are touching, it's not gonna allow you to merge. They have to be close to. I'm gonna simulate. Check this shit out. Definitely I've gone way too far up the neckline. So easy fix, Z. Let's just drag it down. Yeah, get it something like this. I think this is quite perfect, quite literally perfect. But again, we have to respect the 180 rule. So let's just bring it down here as such. And even this could work if you're going for a weirder looking hood. But it's not the case. Let's just stick to the original. Add another curve point here. Okay, and then we just need to curve this side out. Maybe something like this. Boom. There we have it. Maybe we can curve the back in again. Maybe we can even move this one towards the front. And again, this has to do with your artistry. You can look at this line, adjust it as much as you think you should, and just play with it. Because in my opinion, the most important position would be this one. If it looks right like this, then you've done a proper job. Awesome. And if you want to see it better simulated, maybe don't stick with the 20 particle distance. Let's just do, in this case, 10. So it's a bit more detailed. Once I simulate, you're going to see a massive difference that it did. Maybe it's still a bit too high up the neckline, so I'm just going to select the point, drag it down even further. Okay, and I just want to make the opening at the base a bit wider. And the top, I'm also going to open up like this, just so it's a bit more comfortable and easier to throw on. There we go. Maybe even this curve, we can play with it a bit more. Let's try and bring it down. So we have a slant coming from the head. It slants down. Maybe you want something like this. I don't personally like it like this, but there we go. So now let's actually address the length and actually do the hem, do the waistband. Let's try and finalize it. Now, when it comes to the original, you're gonna notice that it's absolutely massive. So in reality, if this was a size M, I would have to select all the components and literally make them 110%, something like this. This is what the original M would look like. I'm not even kidding. It would be as big as this. And personally, I'm not too big of a fan of this. If you are, you can just enlarge it. Don't worry about it. Just scale it up. Not a problem. I'm just gonna Control Z because I like the smaller one. But one thing that 100% bothered me is the fact that when you look at this image of the presentation, to me, at least, this feels like a cropped hoodie. But when you look at the one that they actually sent out, it's not at all. It's like so goddamn long that I don't personally like it almost nearly as much as this render or whatever this might be. But just in case you want a more conservative fit and you are worried that maybe it's not gonna work with your body shape or with your intention, because if you go ahead and do the following step of cropping the hoodie, you're gonna have to learn about styling. You're gonna have to add some layers underneath it. The safer option would definitely be to just have it longer and then just throw it on to finalize whatever outfit you might have in mind. And if that's the case, you just have to do a few slight adjustments. Even though the segments front back are equal, you're gonna notice that the front is actually shorter. Therefore, I would actually wanna select this point here, start dragging it down, maybe even a bit further. And then we actually need to still apply the 180 rule. So I would create a curve point at the front, get it to something like this. Okay, then I want to match up the sides. Use another curve point in order to curve it as such. Then let's try and figure out this one. It's going a bit too high up and it's creating some sort of issues. We also need to drag down the sides. Okay, now we can curve it, smooth it out. It's almost perfect. This one, bring it lower. This one, also bring it lower. This one, we can maybe raise. I don't want this feature to be too drastic. And now when I simulate, this gives me something to work with. Now the back is a bit too high up. I can potentially bring it down as well. Maybe. Yeah, I guess this works. Z, select the sides. But again, if you want to go with the cropped fit, you don't have to follow through this step, all right? Do I recommend that everybody should start wearing cropped fits? Not necessarily. There we go. So something like this. And now I'm just gonna do Control Z. Let's go back to the shape that we had and also look at the cropped version and just choose between the two. See whichever one you think is nicer to actually wear, because the cropped one actually goes above the bum. All right, so you need some high-waisted jeans or you need to have a t-shirt coming out. You need to learn how to style the thing to actually make it work. Whereas this one is just safer. All right, and this is what they actually ended up making as the final product. Personally, here's what I would do. I would actually select the back, start lifting it up, right? I want it maybe slightly above, you know, the bum. I would also select the sides and start dragging those up and have it cropped a bit more like this. This is what I personally like to wear just because it enhances the silhouette. You can wear some properly baggy trousers with this and it wouldn't look weird. But if you do with a super long hoodie and baggy jeans and everything, it just doesn't make any sense. But it's up to you. If you want to do this or not, I'm not going to force you, but I am personally gonna. I just need to also apply the 180 rule here. So let me just correct those lines a tiny bit by adding curves. And now at the front, something like this, where they connect, something like this. You can see it smoothly flowing like this. So the front is basically a bit longer compared to the back. This is what I personally like to see in hoodies. But again, you don't have to follow my lead here if you don't like it. Now let's add the pocket, and this is gonna be actually one of the easiest things to do, at least inside a CLO3D. Check this out. I'm just gonna press G in order to bring out the internal line tool. I'm gonna click right down the middle since it is symmetrically getting created on the opposite side as well. I don't have a perfect idea of where I want to position it. I'm just gonna do it roughly looking at the sketch to maybe something like this. And did I just nail it? I feel like maybe I did. Huh? No, the angle is not perfect. Z, I want to bring this down. Yeah. Okay, maybe lift it up a bit. Lift it up a bit. Huh? Yeah, I mean, play with it. Come on. It's not make or break for the design. It's up to you however you want to design it. I'm going to select the entire front panel, Control C, Control V it. And now I want to select the internal lines that we've just created. Right click and do cut. And that's simply gonna separate it, giving you a pocket bag. I'm gonna select the larger component, which I no longer require. Delete it. Shift this one down, move this one up. And now we're just gonna sew it. So in order to sew this one, I'm gonna use the segment sewing tool. Let's do the middle first. Let's do the side after. And now if I try to do the base, you're gonna notice that since there is no segment point, it's gonna attempt to sew it across the entire width at the base, which is not what we want at all. So let's do it properly instead. I'm gonna press M. I want to start at the center, take it out. So we're doing the shorter piece onto the larger piece. And here's why. Once I click onto the larger piece, it's gonna have a blue dot. It's gonna pop up telling me exactly where I want to stop. And now when I click, it's perfect. But if I wanted to simulate like this, let me save beforehand because it might crash. Check what happens. It completely ruins all the work that we've done. So when you have situations like this one where you know that the piece is meant to be on top or below or on the side of your feature, here's the best way to do it. You can either move it manually, not ideal, or you can right click and find this option, superimpose. In our case, we want it over, so on top. Under if you want it underneath, side if you want it on the side, with stuff like collars, for instance. It doesn't apply here. So I'm gonna do superimpose over, and it's magically gonna snap it in place. So now when I simulate, I literally have no issues. Now that I'm seeing it with the piece on top, you can tell that it's way too wide. The one that we've created is way too wide. And to adjust it, it's actually not that difficult. Check this out. I'm gonna select this point here, hold down shift, select this segment, do the same for the internal lines, and I just wanna shift all of them at the same time. So I'm holding down shift. It did something weird here at the base, which is a bit of a problem. Let me just simulate. Okay, still not ideal. A bit, the smallest amount narrower. Yeah, there we go. Nah, this looks a lot better. But now we have some massive issues here at the base. And to fix them, I'm just going to delete the pocket. Let's do it one more time. I'm going to select the internal line, drag it out. I'm going to take it outside of the perimeter. Control C, Control V, move it down. Come on, just getting acquainted with CLO. I think it's best to do things multiple times just so you learn how to do them. And the second time when you're doing it, you're going to be a lot faster. So now N, let's sew it there. M, let's sew it from the center. outwards, boom, and now I'm just gonna superimpose over. There we have it. Cool. So now you can see it. It has the opening. You can put your arms through there. Not a problem. And now let's actually address the final construction detail, which is also the most fascinating one by far. And it has to do with not only the hemming, but also how the interior of the garment is constructed. You're gonna wanna pay attention because this one actually is kind of mind-blowing. I'm gonna select the front, back, the hoodie, the sleeves. I'm gonna Control C and I'm gonna Control V them in order to copy and duplicate them below. So basically we now have two hoodies as opposed to just one. And the difference between them is that the one that lives underneath is the one that actually has the elastic. So the waistband and the hem on the sleeves. You know how on a regular hoodie, the elastic is actually outside of the main body construction. So you have like an elastic band here, which is visible. Well, we're attaching ours to the lining. It's gonna be completely hidden. And this is the secret behind the seamless look that the Yeezy Gap Balenciaga collab has. And how exactly are we gonna do that? Well, check this out. It's not actually that difficult. I'm gonna select the base here and I'm gonna right click, offset as internal line. Let's make sure that we make it 5 centimeters since we know that our elastic bands are 5 centimeters wide. I'm gonna cut and sew by right clicking, and I want to do exactly the same thing for the front and back. So I'm gonna offset as internal line 5 centimeters, press OK. Now with them selected, right click, cut and sew. I want to delete those internal lines because they can be a bit confusing. Okay, and I also want to convert those points into curve points. Let's select, convert, boom. And now we actually want to sew this entire assembly onto the one that lives underneath. So where exactly are we going to sew it? Well, we only need to sew it here, at the base, here, here, and at the top where the hoodie meets. So only on the visible exposed edges. How am I going to do that? I'm going to press N. I'm going to sew this side to this side. Then I want to sew this side to this side. Then I want to sew the sleeve end with the sleeve elastic. Awesome. And then we need to also sew the opening here. So this one with this one. And now I'm going to select the entire assembly and I'm going to drag it as such. We're going to roughly align them. This is going to be a mess to actually simulate and get right, but don't worry about it too much. Let's just simulate and see exactly how they behave. And if they don't want to get into the proper position, there's a lot that we can do to actually help it. But let's hope that it will. I'm just pushing the one that lives underneath. Trying to get it to its final position. Oh, there we go. I'm gonna lift the hoodie. And as you can see, there are some massive issues here. Don't worry about it too much. This is the one that should be above. Okay, and let's just push it, push it, push it. In the real world, this wouldn't be happening. So this is the kind of stuff that you are gonna find some difficulties, you know, making inside a CLO3D, but you can at least conceptualize the shell. And you can think of it like, these are just separate patterns that I need to print out. I only have to design the exterior in a way. So that's how I would approach it. But we also want to render this one out. So we have to go through this step in order to get like a final, beautiful looking product. Okay. Come on. It's getting there. I can feel it. It just has to poke through. Come on. Come on. I could potentially try and superimpose it under, but I don't have a guarantee that it would work. But you can see it. It went there. Okay, what about this side? This one's the one that lives underneath. Let me just try and push it as such. So I'm stopping the simulation, positioning, starting it again. The sleeve. This one's the one that lives underneath. The opposite side already clicked into place. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna select this side. I want the one that lives underneath this one, right? I'm just gonna select it, delete it, let the simulation run. And then I can just select it and press Ctrl D in order to have it redone. And hopefully it's gonna snap in place a lot easier. Which it seems to be doing, yeah. There we go. So this is pretty much it. And the final detail that we actually need in order to have it sit like this is to just select the lines here. Select the segments, hold down Shift, select the back, select the front. And there is an option here in the property editor called Elastic. We need to tick it on, simulate. Now it's gonna start wrapping, but maybe it's not strong enough. And we can take the ratio and bring it down. Simulate. Let's try a smaller ratio and a higher strength. Boom. There we have it. The Balenciaga Gap collab. In the next chapters, which are part of our masterclass, we'll learn how to prepare the patterns for printing. And then we're off to the atelier to actually piece the garment together. We'll use the same design that we created in CLO3D to now dress a custom avatar and actually make the video that we did for the intro. Yeah, it's gonna be a wild ride. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.